The night my son told me he'd sold my home, I didn't even flinch. I sat there in the county clerk's office, phone pressed to my ear, while my whole world tilted on its axis. I could hear his voice crackling with impatience, sharp and hurried like he was running out of time. "Dad, pack your bags. The deal's done. Tomorrow I'm driving you to a place where they'll take care of you. You can't live out there anymore." For a moment, I didn't answer. My hand rested on the oak counter of the clerk's desk, and the ink from the notary's stamp was still drying on the document in front of me. A lifetime of sweat and sacrifice pressed into a single sheet of paper. My heart beat slow but heavy, like thunder before a storm. I finally said, calm as stone, "I understand your rush, son, but you forgot something important." There was a pause. Then his voice exploded, venomous and unrecognizable. "What the hell are you talking about, you stubborn old fool?" I almost laughed, not out of joy, but out of the bitter irony of it all. While he spat anger into the receiver, I pressed the seal down on the paper that would save everything I had built with my bare hands. The clerk looked at me with a mix of pity and disbelief, like he wanted to ask if I was okay. But I didn't want pity. I wanted justice. That moment, phone in one hand, stamp in the other, was when the truth crystallized. My only child, the boy I once carried on my shoulders through 4th of July parades, was trying to erase me. My name is Edward Ed Whitmore, 78 years old. I was born and raised in Bloomington, Indiana, back when the town was still wrapped in the smell of limestone dust and cornfields that stretched further than the eye could see. My life was simple. My father laid bricks, my mother sewed dresses, and I grew up believing that hard work carved a man's place in this world. I spent 40 years as a county land surveyor. Summers blistered my skin. Winters split my knuckles until they bled. I walked fence lines in boots that leaked rainwater, ate cold sandwiches on the back of rusted trucks, and spent nights hunched over maps with a magnifying glass. I saved every dollar I could, not for luxury, but for a dream. In 1981, I finally bought a 30-acre property just outside Bloomington, a patch of rolling hills with a creek cutting through it and a weathered barn that leaned like an old man dozing on a bench. I planted every maple tree that now shades the yard. I rebuilt the house board by board until it smelled of sawdust and sweat. My wife, Helen, filled it with laughter and cinnamon rolls every Sunday morning. And together we raised our only child, Michael. When Helen passed 12 years ago, cancer, swift and merciless, I thought I'd collapse right along with her. But the land held me up. The rows of pines I planted with my own hands whispered that I still had roots, even if half my heart was buried 6 feet under. Now, at 78, I move slower. Arthritis gnaws at my knees. My hands tremble some mornings when I tie my boots. But my mind, it's sharper than most men 20 years younger. And this land, this home, isn't just dirt and timber. It's 40 years of labor, 40 years of memory. And yet my own blood thought he could sell it from under me. Michael wasn't always like this. He was born restless. While other kids in the neighborhood played with marbles or chased fireflies, he wanted the shiny things. The remote control cars, the sneakers with air cushions, the bike with chrome handlebars. Helen spoiled him. She said she wanted him to have what we never did. I tried to teach him that value wasn't in price tags, but in sweat. But love is uneven when one parent pushes and the other cushions. We poured everything into his education. I sold timber, Helen picked up substitute teaching shifts, and together we scraped enough to send him to law school in Chicago. The day he walked across the stage in that black gown, I thought every sacrifice had been worth it. But success tastes different on every tongue. For Michael, it tasted like champagne, imported cars, and leather office chairs. He married a corporate attorney, Melissa, who made it clear she hated visiting that dusty old farm. Their visits grew shorter, their tone sharper. Every time they drove down the gravel driveway, Michael looked around like he was walking through a museum exhibit, something to admire briefly, then leave behind. Then came the questions. "Dad, where's the deed to the property? Do you have it stored safe? Dad, don't you think living way out here is lonely? Wouldn't it be better in a condo near us? Dad, do you have a plan for when you can't take care of yourself anymore?" At first I brushed it off as concern. But concern doesn't come with a real estate agent strolling my land, snapping photos without asking me first. I should have seen it sooner. 3 months ago, a friend at the courthouse called me after hours. He sounded uneasy. "Ed, there's a power of attorney filed here, with your name on it. But Ed, I know your signature. This one, it doesn't look right." When I saw the document myself, my stomach dropped. It was my signature, almost, but not quite. The loop's too tight, the slant wrong. A forgery. My son's hand, I suspected, or someone he paid. Worse, there was already a contract of sale in motion. A development company from Indianapolis had wired a deposit, 30%, into an account I didn't recognize. My farm, the barn, the house where Helen's laughter still echoed, was already being sliced up into future blueprints for a luxury golf resort. And I was still alive, breathing, walking, very much in my right mind. I sat in the dark that night, the walls pressing in, my chest heavy. The betrayal felt worse than any winter storm I'd trudged through in my surveying days. My son, the boy who once rode shotgun in my old Ford pickup while we delivered firewood, had turned me into a liability. Part of me wanted to call him right then, scream, demand answers. Another part of me, the colder, steadier part, knew better. A storm doesn't fight the wind, it bends until it can strike. So I called Howard Briggs, a retired attorney I'd known for years. He didn't sugarcoat. "Ed, this is fraud, forgery, theft." He could face prison. I didn't want my son in prison. But I wasn't about to be buried alive in a nursing home while developers bulldozed my fields. So Howard helped me draw up a protection plan. We filed to freeze all transactions on the property. We reported the forgery, and I got an independent medical evaluation certifying I was in full mental capacity. Signed, stamped, notarized, ironclad. 2 weeks later, I walked into the county clerk's office to finalize the filings. That's when Michael called. "Dad, pack your bags. I've already handled everything. I sold the place. Tomorrow I'll take you somewhere better." I could hear the city noises behind him. Car horns, sirens, the hum of a life lived fast. He sounded like a man cornered, desperate, maybe even afraid. But he still thought he had the upper hand. "Son," I said quietly, "you forgot something important." "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked. I pressed the notary's stamp into the paper, the ink spreading like a seal of victory. And for the first time in days, I felt air fill my lungs clean and whole. The clerk looked up, startled by the laughter that broke from my chest. Not joy, not mockery, but the kind of laughter that comes when you realize you've survived the worst. "Michael," I whispered into the phone, "you'll understand soon enough." I hung up before he could answer. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what was to come. That night I drove home through the back roads of Indiana, headlights cutting through fields of corn swaying like silent witnesses. My land waited for me. My house stood firm, just as it had through storms and summers. But I knew nothing would ever be the same again, because betrayal by a stranger wounds the body, but betrayal by your only son carves into the soul. And I hadn't even faced the worst of it yet. If you've listened this far, thank you. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell, but maybe they can keep another heart from breaking the way mine did. If this touched you, I'd love for you to share something with me. Leave a comment telling me your city or where you're listening from. It makes me feel less alone out here. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. There are many more chapters to come. When Michael hung up on me that night, the silence that followed was louder than any storm. I sat in my recliner, the house creaking around me, the tick of the grandfather clock sounding like a hammer driving nails into my chest. I kept telling myself, you stopped the sale, you stopped the fraud. But I also knew men like my son didn't back down after one roadblock. I didn't have to wait long to be proven right. The very next morning, tires crunched up my gravel driveway. I looked out the window, expecting to see Michael's silver Mercedes, but instead it was a dark sedan I didn't recognize. 2 men in pressed suits stepped out, their shoes sinking in the dust like they didn't belong anywhere near farmland. I opened the door before they knocked. "Mr. Whitmore?" one asked, flipping open a leather folio. "I'm Dr. Henry Klein, licensed psychiatrist. This is Mrs. Alvarez from Adult Protective Services. Your son has requested an evaluation of your mental competency." I felt the blood drain from my face. So this was his next move. If he couldn't steal the farm with forged papers, he'd try to have me declared unfit. I forced a smile, though my chest was a war drum. "Come on in," I said, stepping aside. The living room suddenly felt small with their clipboards and professional smiles. Dr. Klein sat across from me, pen poised. Mrs. Alvarez scanned the family photos on the mantel. Helen in her Sunday dress, Michael as a boy clutching a baseball bat. "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Klein began gently, "your son is concerned about your ability to live independently. He says you've been forgetful, paranoid, sometimes confused about where you are." My fists tightened on the armrests. "Is that what he told you?" Mrs. Alvarez leaned forward. "We just need to ask a few questions. It won't take long." I almost laughed, because 2 weeks before, anticipating exactly this, I had spent an entire day at the Indiana University Medical Center in Indianapolis. Neurology, psychiatry, geriatrics, the works. The doctors ran every test in the book, and I had walked out with a stamped, notarized evaluation, fully competent, fully independent. I stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out the manila folder I'd kept waiting like a loaded gun. I laid it on the coffee table. "You might want to start with this?" Dr. Klein flipped through it. His eyebrows shot up. "These are very recent evaluations, comprehensive, signed by specialists." Mrs. Alvarez frowned. "Why didn't your son mention this to us?" "Because," I said, keeping my voice calm though my heart was burning, "my son isn't worried about my health. He's worried about losing his grip on what doesn't belong to him." They exchanged a look. Professionals know when they're being used. Within 20 minutes, they apologized, said they had no grounds for further action, and left in a cloud of awkward retreat. But Michael hadn't come himself. He'd sent them like pawns, which told me two things. He was scared, and he wasn't finished. That evening, I called Howard, my retired lawyer friend. He listened silently, then said, "He's doubling down, Ed. First the forged power of attorney, now competency claims. Next, he'll try public opinion. People like your son, they don't stop until they're forced to." He was right. 2 days later, the whispers started. At the gas station, the clerk avoided my eyes. At the diner where I'd eaten breakfast every Saturday for 20 years, the waitress leaned down and said softly, "Ed, I heard you've been having memory issues. That true?" I wanted to slam my fist down. Instead, I smiled. "My memory's fine, Cheryl. Better than Michael's conscience. But inside it hurt like hell. My son was poisoning the well, spreading rumors that his old man was senile. That kind of gossip travels faster than a tornado in a small town." A week passed before Michael finally appeared in person. He pulled up in that shining Mercedes, the hood still warm from the interstate. He didn't bother knocking, just walked in like he still belonged there. He found me in the kitchen, hands deep in bread dough, Helen's old recipe. I kneaded slowly, letting silence weigh between us. "Dad," he said, tossing his keys on the counter, "we need to talk." I didn't look up. "About what, son? The farm you tried to sell? The signatures you forged? The state workers you sent to my door?" His jaw tightened. "I was trying to help. You can't keep up this place by yourself. It's falling apart." I pressed the dough hard, the table creaking under my strength. "This house has stood longer than your marriage, longer than your career. It's not falling apart. It's standing strong. Just like me." He sighed, pacing like a caged animal. "You don't get it. I've got bills, Dad. Big ones. Clients are suing. The firm is drowning. If I don't fix this, I lose everything." There it was. The truth, or at least a sliver of it. "Michael," I said softly, "you don't lose everything by losing money. You lose everything by losing your soul. And from where I'm standing, you're bankrupt already." His face flushed red. "You think you're righteous? You think your little piece of dirt means more than me?" I looked at him then, really looked. His tailored suit, his expensive watch, his thinning hair slicked back with desperation, and I saw not the man, but the boy he once was, the boy who cried when he struck out at Little League, who fell asleep in the truck on long drives, head against my shoulder. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who would sell his father's grave if it meant paying off another creditor. He grabbed his keys, his voice low and trembling. "You'll regret this, Dad. I swear to God, you'll regret this." He stormed out, gravel spitting under his tires. I stood alone in the kitchen, my hands still dusted with flour, staring at the door long after it closed. My chest ached, not from fear, but from grief. Losing Helen had torn me in half. Now I realized I was losing the other half too, not to death, but to greed. That night sleep wouldn't come. I sat on the porch with a lantern, watching the fireflies blink across the fields. I thought of Helen, how she'd always said Michael had a good heart deep down, even when he was selfish. "He'll come around," she'd say, her hand on mine. But what if she was wrong? What if the man I raised was gone for good? A rustle broke my thoughts. It was Sam Carter, my neighbor from half a mile down the road, walking up with his hound at his heels. Sam's a retired cop, a man who doesn't waste words. "Heard your boy's been stirring trouble," he said, lowering himself onto the porch steps. I nodded. "He's trying to bury me before I'm dead." Sam spat into the dirt. "Then you better be ready for a fight, because men like him don't quit until someone makes them." He was right. And as the crickets sang in the fields, I made a silent vow. I wasn't just going to defend my land, I was going to defend my dignity. This wasn't just about acres or deeds anymore. This was about my name, my life, my legacy. And Michael had just declared war. The morning after Michael stormed out of my kitchen, I walked the property lines. It was something I'd always done when my mind was heavy. Boots crunching on the gravel, cane in one hand. The horizon stretched out like it had answers. The land has a way of grounding a man. Out there, between the rusted barbed wire and the tall maples I planted 40 years ago, everything felt steady, permanent, mine. But permanence is an illusion. I knew that now. By noon, the first letter came. It was hand-delivered by a courier in a suit too stiff for Indiana summer. The envelope bore the stamp of a Chicago law firm, shiny, expensive, impersonal. Inside, 6 pages of legal jargon told me exactly what I already suspected. Michael had filed for guardianship. According to the petition, I was exhibiting signs of dementia, paranoia, and inability to manage personal affairs. He listed concerns for my safety and financial exploitation by outsiders. The irony burned so deep I almost choked. The only outsider trying to exploit me was my own flesh and blood. I read the words 3 times, my hand shaking, not from weakness but rage. He was trying to strip me bare, my rights, my independence, my dignity. If the court granted guardianship, Michael wouldn't just own my land. He'd own me. I folded the papers carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it on the kitchen table. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, black as tar, and stared out the window. He wanted war. He'd get it. 2 days later, I found myself walking into Howard Briggs' office downtown. Howard had come out of retirement just to help me, which told you the kind of man he was. His office smelled like dust and old leather, walls lined with law books that hadn't been cracked in years. He adjusted his glasses, scanning the petition. "He's painting you as a liability, Ed. If the judge believes this, guardianship could be granted temporarily until further evaluation." "I've already got medical proof I'm fine," I said, sliding the thick folder across the desk. Howard nodded. "That's good. But he's playing a longer game. Public opinion, sympathy for the son who's just trying to protect his old father. Judges are human. They hear stories, they see community whispers. We'll need more than paper. We'll need testimony. People who can vouch you're sound, responsible, independent." I thought of Sam Carter, of my neighborly allies, of the clerk at the feed store who saw me haggle prices every week. Maybe they could help. Still, the fact that I even needed to prove my sanity felt like a slap in the face. "Howard," I said quietly, How does a man defend himself when the enemy carries his own last name? Howard leaned back, sighing, with patience and with truth. But Ed, he tapped the petition. Prepare yourself. Michael's desperate. Desperate men don't fight fair. That truth hit sooner than I expected. It was a Sunday morning when I went to church, the same white clapboard building where Helen and I had been married. I sat in our old pew, the wood worn smooth by decades of hands, but I could feel eyes on me, whispers sliding down the aisle. During the coffee hour, one of the deacons, a woman I'd known since childhood, pulled me aside. Ed, she said gently, is it true you've been losing track of time, forgetting where you are? My throat went dry. No, it's not true. She smiled politely, but doubt lingered in her eyes. And that's when I realized Michael's lies weren't just in legal papers. They were seeping into the marrow of the community. Every raised eyebrow, every half smile carried the question, is old Ed losing it? When I got home, I sat on the porch until dusk, the cicadas screaming in the trees. I wasn't afraid of losing the land anymore. I was afraid of losing something worse, my name. In small towns, a man's reputation is his lifeline, and mine was being strangled by my own son. Michael showed up again the following week, this time with Melissa at his side. She looked at me like I was already in a nursing home, her lips pressed so tight they barely moved when she spoke. Ed, this doesn't have to be a fight, she said, brushing an invisible speck off her blazer. We can transition you into a comfortable assisted living facility. Michael and I will make sure you're taken care of, and the land, well, it'll finally reach its potential. I looked at her coldly. This land already reached its potential. It raised a boy, fed a family, buried a woman I loved. What more do you think it owes you? Michael's jaw clenched. Dad, stop being dramatic. You're clinging to dirt. We're offering you comfort. Comfort? I laughed bitterly. Comfort is Helen humming in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. Comfort is sitting under the oak tree I planted with my own hands. You wouldn't know comfort if it shook your hand. His eyes hardened. If you won't come willingly, the court will make sure you do. Melissa tugged at his sleeve. Let's go. They left in a storm of perfume and exhaust fumes, leaving me alone in the doorway with my pulse pounding in my ears. The weeks dragged on. My days became a strange rhythm of tending the land by daylight and preparing my defense by night. I gathered affidavits from neighbors, friends, even the county doctor who still had records of my checkups. But Michael fought dirtier with each passing day. He spread rumors in town, saying I'd nearly burned down my kitchen last winter, that I'd been found wandering the road at midnight. All lies. One afternoon, Sam Carter came by carrying a six-pack. He dropped it on the table with a grunt. Heard Michael's been talking down at the bar, saying you're a danger to yourself. I nearly put him through the jukebox. I managed a tired smile. Would have been a hell of a song choice. Sam leaned in, eyes serious. Ed, he's unraveling. Men unraveling like that. They do stupid things. Be careful. I nodded, but inside, unease coiled like a snake. The guardianship hearing was set for mid-September. A crisp morning, courthouse steps crowded with faces both curious and sympathetic. I walked in alone, cane steady, suit pressed. Michael walked in flanked by attorneys, Melissa glued to his side. Inside, the judge listened patiently as Michael's lawyer painted me as a frail old man clinging to fantasies. They called witnesses I'd never met, medical consultants, who nodded solemnly as they read second-hand reports. Then it was our turn. Howard called Sam Carter to the stand. Sam spoke with the quiet conviction of a man who'd seen too much in his years as a cop. Ed is sharper than half the men my age. He fixes his own fences, balances his books, and never misses a town meeting. If that's incompetence, then we're all doomed. The courtroom chuckled. Even the judge cracked a smile. Then Howard presented my medical evaluations, stamped and signed by Indiana's finest. The papers landed heavy on the desk, undeniable. Michael's face darkened, jaw twitching. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. The judge leaned forward, glasses low on his nose. Mr. Whitmore appears competent. petition denied. I should have felt relief, and for a moment I did. But as Michael and Melissa stormed out of that courtroom, their whispers sharp as knives, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. That night back at the farm, I poured myself a glass of bourbon. The cicadas were quiet. The sky stretched black and endless. I thought of Helen, of how proud she'd be that I'd stood my ground. But pride is a thin blanket. As I sat there, the silence grew heavy, and a thought I'd been pushing aside finally took root. Michael hadn't just been reckless. He hadn't just been greedy. He was hiding something darker. Because no man risks prison time and destroys his father's name just for comfort. No, my son was desperate for a reason he hadn't told me yet. And I feared the truth was going to be uglier than anything I'd imagined. I should have celebrated that day. The judge's gavel had dropped in my favor, the guardianship denied, the land still mine. But instead of triumph, I drove home with a pit in my gut. Victories like that don't end wars, they just start the next battle. And sure enough, the storm rolled in faster than I expected. It started with a phone call, not from Michael, but from someone I didn't recognize. The voice was low, gravelly, like tires crunching over broken glass. "You tell your boy," the man said, "that he's 2 weeks late. If he doesn't pay up, we come looking, and we don't care who answers the door." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, staring at the receiver, the dial tone humming in my ear. My skin prickled cold. This wasn't just debt collectors. This was something meaner, darker. I called Howard right away, relayed the words. He swore under his breath. "Ed, your son's in deep. Gambling, I'd wager, or loans he couldn't repay. Whatever it is, if people like that are calling you, it means he's desperate and dangerous." I hung up, the bourbon from the night before still sour in my throat. That evening, I walked the fields, listening to the cicadas. Every snap of a twig sounded sharper, every shadow heavier. For the first time in my life on this land, I felt unsafe. The next day, Melissa showed up, not in her polished Mercedes, but in an old sedan, kids in the back seat. She looked worn, dark circles under her eyes, makeup smeared like she hadn't slept. "Ed," she whispered, glancing at the children before pulling me aside, "I need to tell you something." She confessed that Michael had been gambling for years. At first it was just cards with colleagues, then poker nights in Chicago, then high-stakes tables in Indiana riverboats. When the losses mounted, he borrowed money, from banks, from clients, and eventually from people who didn't give receipts. "He told me he'd fix it with the land," she said, voice breaking. "Said a sale would clear everything, but it's worse than I thought. They're calling me at work. They've shown up at the house. Last night someone smashed our window." The children sat quietly in the car, too still, too aware. My stomach twisted. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Tears welled in her eyes. "Because I thought he'd fix it before you found out. I didn't want to shame him. Or you." I looked at her, at the kids, at the life unraveling around them. My anger toward Michael didn't disappear, but it bent under the weight of pity. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd dragged his whole family into the fire. I told Melissa to take the kids inside, let them eat cookies in Helen's old kitchen, while we talked on the porch. "Melissa," I said, "you're welcome here, you and the children. This farm isn't just mine anymore. It's theirs too. Stay in the old caretaker's house out back. It's rough, but it's safe. Safer than where you are now." She stared at me, stunned. "After everything he's done, you'd still—" "I'm not doing it for him," I interrupted. "I'm doing it for them. They didn't choose this, and neither did you." Her shoulders slumped, relief softening her face. For the first time in years, I saw gratitude there instead of cold disdain. That night, Melissa and the kids moved into the caretaker's cottage. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, but I dug out blankets from the attic. Sam brought over a space heater, and by bedtime the place smelled of tomato soup and childhood again. For the first time in a long time, the farm didn't feel empty. But safety is a fragile thing. A week later, I spotted a black pickup idling at the end of my driveway. Tinted windows, engine rumbling low. I stood on the porch, cane in hand, staring. After a few minutes, it rolled away. The next night, the dogs barked at shadows by the barn. Sam came running, shotgun in hand, but whoever it was had already vanished. And then one evening, while I sat with Pedro and Clara, my grandkids, teaching them how to plant tomatoes in the garden, a note was slid under the porch door. No signature, just 3 words scrawled in red ink: pay his debt. I couldn't hide it anymore. I gathered Melissa and Sam in the kitchen that night. The light flickered over their faces as I laid the note on the table. "They're coming closer," I said quietly. "This isn't just Michael's fight anymore. It's ours." Sam frowned, his hand on the table like a rock. "You need to go to the sheriff." But I shook my head. "And say what? That my grown son borrowed money from criminals and now they're circling my land? They'll laugh me out of the station. Until something happens, there's no case." Melissa's hands trembled around her mug. "What if they come when the kids are here?" "They already have," I said grimly. The silence after that was thick as tar. 2 days later, Michael finally called. His voice was different this time. No arrogance, no venom, just fear. "Dad," he whispered, "I need help. Please. They're going to kill me." I closed my eyes, pinched the bridge of my nose. "Where are you?" "Indianapolis. Some motel off the interstate. I can't stay here. They found me once already." "You put your family in danger, Michael," I said, voice low. "You put me in danger, and now you want me to fix it? I know, I was wrong, all of it. But please, if I don't pay them something soon, it won't just be me. They'll come for you too." For a long time, I didn't answer. My heart warred with my mind. The boy I'd raised was still in there somewhere, buried under arrogance and fear. But saving him might cost me everything. Finally, I said, "Come home. Face what you've done. That's the only way forward." "I can't," he whispered. "If I come there, they'll follow. And I won't drag you all down with me." The line went quiet, then dead. I sat in the dark for hours after, the farmhouse creaking around me, the night pressing in. That week was the longest of my life. Every knock at the door made my heart seize. Every car slowing on the gravel made me grip my cane tighter. Sam checked in daily, shotgun always nearby. Melissa cooked for the kids, but her eyes stayed glued to the windows. The farm was alive with fear, and I hated it. Then one night, just before dawn, the sound of glass shattering jolted me awake. I rushed downstairs, cane in hand, to find a brick lying on the living room floor, shards of glass scattered like ice. Tied to the brick was another note. This one longer. "Time's up. His blood or yours." I sat in that broken glass until the sun rose, light spilling over the fields I'd tended for 40 years. My land had seen drought, storms, and death, but never this. Never enemies I couldn't see. Never danger circling like vultures overhead. I knew then. Michael's choices had dragged us into a darkness we couldn't escape by waiting. And if he wouldn't come home, I'd have to go find him. Because the next knock on the door might not leave us standing. The night the brick came through my window, I didn't sleep a wink. I sat in the rocking chair in Helen's old spot, cane across my knees, the note on the table like a curse I couldn't burn. "Time's up. His blood or yours." Those words weren't bluffs. I'd spent a lifetime reading men, measuring land disputes, watching farmers squabble over inches of soil that meant dollars in yield. You can tell when someone's bluffing. And whoever wrote that note wasn't bluffing. I knew then that waiting wasn't an option. If Michael wouldn't come home, I'd have to go drag him back myself. At dawn, I loaded my truck. Flashlight, thermos of coffee, the manila folder of legal documents I carried everywhere now, and something I hadn't touched in years. The old .38 revolver I kept locked in Helen's cedar chest. I checked the chamber. Loaded. Not for vengeance, not for justice, just in case. Melissa watched from the porch, arms crossed against the morning chill. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded. "He's still my son. If I don't find him, they will. And I don't want their way to be the last thing he sees." She hesitated, then pressed something into my hand. A photograph. Michael with Pedro on his shoulders, Clara laughing at their feet, taken years back at a county fair. His smile in that photo wasn't the twisted grin of desperation I saw now. It was real, pure. "Remind him of this," she whispered. I tucked it into my pocket. "I'll bring him home." The motel wasn't hard to find. Howard had traced a credit card charge from Indianapolis, and a friend at the clerk's office pointed me toward a roadside place off I-70. Neon sign flickering, rooms rented by the hour, the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. I parked a block away, cane tapping as I walked to the door marked 27. The curtains were drawn tight. I knocked once, twice. "Michael, it's me." Silence. Then the rattle of a chain lock. The door cracked, his eyes bloodshot and sunken. He looked 20 years older than he had a month ago. "Dad." His voice was hoarse, like gravel scraping metal. "You shouldn't be here." I pushed past the door, ignoring his protest. The room stank of sweat, booze, and takeout containers stacked in the corner. The blinds rattled in the wind. Michael sank onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "They're gonna kill me," he whispered. "You don't understand, Dad. I owe too much." I tried to fix it, I did, but every time I thought I was ahead. "Gambling?" I asked sharply. He nodded, shame burning in his face. "Cards, roulette, online bets. I don't even know how it got this bad. At first it was fun, then it was bills, then it was clients' money. Now, it's everything." My chest tightened. "You stole from your clients?" He looked away. That was answer enough. I wanted to rage, to grab him by the collar and shake him until he understood the hell he'd dragged us into. But instead, I sat beside him, the bed groaning under our weight. "You've got a wife and 2 kids living under my roof," I said quietly, "and men leaving threats in my living room. If you've lost everything else, you don't get to lose them too. Do you hear me?" He swallowed hard, nodding, but his eyes were glassy with hopelessness. That's when the knock came. Hard. Fast. 3 raps that rattled the thin door. Michael froze. His face went pale. "They found me," he whispered. The knock came again, louder this time. "Open up, Whitmore." The voice was sharp, clipped with the weight of command. I motioned for Michael to stay quiet, but he was trembling, sweating through his shirt. The knock turned to pounding. "Open the damn door, or we break it." I stood, cane in one hand, revolver hidden behind my back. My heart hammered, but my mind was clear. I unlatched the chain, opened the door just enough. 2 men stood there. Not suits this time. Jeans, leather jackets, tattoos creeping up their necks. One tall and wiry, the other thick as a bulldozer. Their eyes scanned me, confused for a moment. "Who the hell are you?" the tall one asked. "I'm his father." The bulldozer snorted. "Cute. Family reunion." He shoved the door wider, stepping into the room. Michael shrank back on the bed. "You've got one day," the tall one said, pointing at Michael. "One day, or we take more than money." His gaze slid to me, cold and sharp. "And Daddy won't stop us." I stepped forward, cane steady, revolver hidden at my side. "You lay a finger on him, or my family, and you'll find out just how wrong you are." For a beat, the room froze. The men glanced at each other, then laughed. "Old man's got bite," the bulldozer sneered. "We'll see how long it lasts." They left, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the frame. Michael collapsed, head in his hands. "They're not bluffing, Dad." "They'll do it." I holstered the revolver. "Then we don't give them the chance." We left that night. I didn't care if it meant dragging him by the arm. He was coming back to the farm with me. The drive was silent, headlights carving tunnels through the dark. Michael stared out the window, jaw tight. I kept my hands locked on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. When we pulled into the driveway near dawn, Melissa came running, the kids tumbling behind her. She hugged Michael tight, sobbing, while he stood stiff as a board, shame radiating from him. Pedro clung to his father's waist. "Dad, are you staying this time?" Michael's throat worked. "Yeah, buddy, I'm staying." For the first time, I believed him. The farm became a fortress after that. Sam installed cameras on the barn and the house, motion lights along the driveway. Melissa kept the kids close, homeschooling them for now. And Michael, well, he stayed. He helped mend fences, carried wood, shoveled mud. His hands blistered, his back ached, but for once, he didn't complain. But every night when the sun sank, I saw the fear creep back into his eyes. He knew the men weren't done. Neither did I. It was only a matter of time before they came knocking again. That knock came 3 nights later. It was close to midnight. The dogs barked first, then the crunch of tires on gravel echoed through the dark. I grabbed the revolver, Michael at my side with a baseball bat. Melissa gathered the kids in the back room, whispering prayers. Headlights swept across the porch, a black pickup again, doors slammed, footsteps approached. Then a voice called out, different this time. Calm, cold. Whitmore, you've got something that belongs to us. Time to pay up. Michael's grip tightened on the bat. I could feel him trembling beside me. I raised the revolver, aimed steady at the door. My heart pounded like a war drum. This was it. The porch groaned under their boots. 1 step, 2. The screen door creaked, and for the first time in my 78 years, I realized the truth. I couldn't protect us with land deeds and notarized papers anymore. This was blood against blood, flesh against flesh. And when that door opened, my son and I were either going to stand together or fall apart forever. The night they came back, the air was so still it felt wrong. Crickets hushed. Even the dogs went silent, their hackles up but no sound. I stood in the hallway with the revolver in my hand, Michael beside me gripping that old baseball bat like a lifeline. The kids huddled in the back room with Melissa, her voice a soft whisper I couldn't make out but knew was prayer. Then the knock. Slow this time. Deliberate. A sound meant to remind you how fragile a door really is. Whitmore, the voice drawled. We're tired of games. Bring him out. Michael stiffened, sweat beading his forehead. He looked at me like a boy again, not a grown man with debts stacked higher than his pride. His eyes begged me for something I wasn't sure I could give. I whispered, stay behind me, no matter what. The knob rattled. The wood creaked. I stepped forward, heart pounding, and yanked the door open. 3 of them stood on the porch. The tall one from the motel, wiry frame like barbed wire wrapped in leather. The bulldozer, thick neck gleaming with sweat. And a third man, older, calmer, with a trimmed beard and eyes that didn't blink. I knew immediately he was the one in charge. He smiled faintly. Evening, Mr. Whitmore. We're here for your son. Nothing personal. My grip tightened on the revolver. You're trespassing on my land. That makes it personal. The bulldozer chuckled. Old man's got guts. Too bad guts don't pay debt. Michael stepped forward, voice cracking. I'll get you the money. I just need time. The leader's smile vanished. Time ran out weeks ago. His gaze shifted back to me. Hand him over, or we take him. And if you get in the way. He let the sentence hang, heavy as the humid night air. I raised the gun. My voice didn't shake. You'll find out what happens when a man's cornered in his own home. The silence stretched, the kind that makes your ears ring. Then, without warning, the bulldozer lunged forward. The world slowed. The gun roared in my hand, louder than thunder. The flash lit the porch, the recoil jolting up my arm. The bullet hit the porch rail, splintering wood inches from his leg. Next one's not a warning, I said. The bulldozer froze, his chest heaving. The leader raised a hand, stopping him. His eyes narrowed, studying me. Not fear, not respect, calculation. You've got sand, old man, he said softly, but you can't guard him forever. We'll be back. He turned, motioning to his men. The 3 of them walked off into the night like wolves retreating into the tree line, but I knew they weren't gone, just waiting. Inside, the house was chaos. Melissa clutched the kids, eyes wide with terror. Michael was shaking, his bat clattering to the floor. I holstered the revolver, my knees suddenly weak. The adrenaline drained out, leaving me hollow. Michael dropped into a chair, head in his hands. They're never gonna stop. Never. I leaned against the table, staring at him. Then it's time you stop running. Stop hiding. You want to save yourself, your wife, your kids? You face this. You confess. You take responsibility. He looked up, eyes raw. Prison, Dad. I'll lose everything. You already did, I snapped. But you still got breath in your lungs and a family that doesn't deserve to be collateral damage. You want redemption. It starts with truth. The room was quiet, except for the tick of the clock. Melissa's eyes glistened. The kids clung to her. Sam Carter, who'd run over when he heard the gunshot, leaned in the doorway, shotgun slung across his arm. He's right, Sam said. The law won't erase your debt to them, but it'll make sure you don't owe it with blood. Better the county jail than a pine box. Michael's face twisted, torn between pride and fear. Then he nodded, slow and reluctant. Tomorrow. I'll turn myself in tomorrow. I exhaled, relief and dread tangled together. It wasn't the end of the fight, but it was the first real choice Michael had made in years that looked like a man's. But the night wasn't finished testing us. At 3 a.m., the dogs barked again. I jolted awake, revolver back in hand, heart hammering. But when I opened the door, it wasn't the men. It was fire. The barn glowed orange against the black sky, flames climbing fast, crackling loud as gunfire. The air smelled of smoke and gasoline. Dad! Michael's voice roared behind me as he sprinted past, grabbing a hose. Sam appeared seconds later, dragging buckets from the well. We fought the fire like madmen, smoke stinging our eyes, the heat licking at our skin. Melissa kept the kids inside, shielding them from the blaze. By dawn, the barn was half ash, half charred skeleton. The horses had bolted into the field, thank God, alive. But the seed stock, the tools, the tractor, all gone. A message, clear as the notes they'd left. Next time, it won't be the barn. I stood in the rubble as the sun rose, sweat and soot streaking my face. My legs trembled, not from exhaustion, but from fury. They want to break us, I said aloud. They think fire and fear will make us fold. Michael's face was blackened with ash, his eyes red but alive. He spat into the dirt. They don't know me. I turned to him, saw something new in his eyes. Not arrogance, not desperation, something harder. Resolved. For the first time in years, I saw my son look like a man I could stand beside. That afternoon, I called Howard. Tomorrow, I said, we're driving to the sheriff's office. Michael's confessing. Fraud, theft, gambling debts, all of it. Howard hesitated. Ed, you know that won't clear the men chasing him. I know, I said, but it'll take away the ground they're standing on. If he owns his sins, they've got less power to use them against him. And if they don't care about leverage, only blood? Howard asked. I looked out at the smoking barn. Then they'll have to come through me, and I'm not going anywhere. That night, Michael sat at the kitchen table, the kids already asleep. He pulled the photograph Melissa had given me earlier from my pocket, studying it like it was a relic. I don't deserve them, he whispered. I poured us both a glass of water. No, but you can start earning them back. His hand shook as he held the picture. Tomorrow. Yes, I said firmly. Tomorrow. The next morning, as the sun burned off the fog, we loaded into the truck, me, Michael, and Sam for backup. Melissa hugged him long, tears wetting his shirt, the kids clinging to his arms. I watched him, chest heavy. Tomorrow wasn't just confession. Tomorrow was judgment, but it was also the first step toward redemption. As we pulled down the gravel drive, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The farm stood scarred but unbroken. So was I. And so, I prayed, was my son. The morning we drove into town, the sky was washed gray, a storm crouching somewhere on the horizon. Michael sat stiff in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Sam rode in the back, shotgun across his lap, though wrapped in an old towel just in case. We didn't say much. What was there to say? Words couldn't clean the slate. Only action could. The courthouse loomed taller than I remembered, its limestone walls pale and solemn against the clouds. I'd walked those steps 100 times in my years as a surveyor, filing deeds, settling disputes, watching farmers argue over fences. But this time was different. This time I wasn't a professional. I was a father bringing his son to judgment. Inside, the sheriff's office smelled of burnt coffee and floor wax. Sheriff Daniels, a man I'd known since he was a boy tossing hay bales at his father's farm, raised his eyebrows when we walked in. "Morning, Ed," he said slowly. His eyes shifted to Michael. "And morning to you too, counselor. This a social visit?" Michael swallowed hard, then shook his head. His voice cracked. "I'm here to confess. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, forgery. All of it." The room went still. Deputies stopped shuffling papers. Phones seemed to stop ringing. Daniels leaned back in his chair, studying Michael like he was a riddle. "That's a heavy load you're dropping at my desk." Michael's shoulders sagged. "I don't have a choice. It's the truth." For the next 2 hours he poured it out. The gambling, the loans, the forged power of attorney. The client's money funneled into casinos and cards. I sat in the corner, the revolver heavy under my jacket, listening as my son dismantled himself piece by piece. By the end, Daniels rubbed his jaw. "You understand this means charges, right? Likely jail time, loss of your license." Michael nodded. "I understand." Daniels looked at me. "And you, Ed? You sure about this? It'll drag your name into the mud." I met his eyes. "My name's already been dragged. This is the only way to start pulling it back." He held my gaze, then sighed. "All right, we'll book him. But Ed, watch your back. Men you borrow from outside the banks don't care much about court proceedings." I nodded. I already knew. Word spread faster than fire through dry grass. By sundown, the whole town knew that Michael Whitmore, son of Edward, had turned himself in. At the diner, I felt eyes on me. At the hardware store, men shook their heads. Some whispered pity, some disgust. But then something surprising happened. At the grocery store, an old farmer named Carl, who'd once threatened me with a shotgun during a boundary dispute, put a hand on my shoulder. "Takes guts, Ed. Most folks would have looked the other way. You did right." At church the next Sunday, the same deacon who'd doubted my memory weeks earlier hugged me tight. "We're praying for your family." The whispers didn't stop, but they softened. Sympathy, not suspicion, filled the air. Maybe truth really did carry its own kind of power. At home, Melissa tried to keep life steady for the kids. She baked bread in Helen's old pans, hung clothes on the line, read to Clara under the oak tree. But at night, when she thought I wasn't looking, I saw her staring off, worry carved into her face. One evening, I found her on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "They're asking questions at work," she said quietly. "About Michael, about me, about whether I knew." I sat beside her, the boards creaking under our weight. "And did you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Not like this. I knew he gambled. I knew money was tight. But I didn't know the lies ran this deep. I should have. I should have pushed harder, asked more questions." "Melissa," I cut in gently, "don't take blame that isn't yours. He made those choices. You're making yours now. And they're the right ones." She sniffed, nodded. For the first time, I think she believed me. But peace was short-lived. 3 nights after Michael's confession, headlights cut down the driveway again. Sam and I were on the porch before the car stopped. A different vehicle this time, a sleek black SUV, windows tinted. The door opened, and out stepped the leader, the calm one from the porch. He wore a crisp jacket now, his beard trimmed neat. He walked like a man who didn't rush for anyone. "Evening again, Mr. Whitmore," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Heard your boy finally came clean." I didn't answer. My hand rested on the revolver in my pocket. He smiled. "That's good for him. But see, confession doesn't pay debts. Money does. And since he doesn't have any..." His eyes drifted across the fields, to the farmhouse, to the faint glow of lights in the caretaker's cottage. "We're left with options. Ugly ones." Sam shifted his weight, shotgun visible now. "You're trespassing." The man's smile didn't falter. "And you're alive because I allow it. For now." He leaned closer, his breath hot on the night air. "A week, that's all. A week to find the money, or we collect another way." He tapped the porch post with 2 fingers like it was already his, then turned and walked back to the SUV. Gravel spat as they left, taillights fading into the dark. Inside, Melissa was pale, clutching the kids close. Michael wasn't there. He was in county jail by then, awaiting arraignment. But his absence didn't mean we were safe. "They won't stop," Melissa whispered, "even with him gone." She was right. That night I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else was asleep. The revolver lay on the wood beside me, the photograph Melissa had given me weeks ago on the other side. Michael laughing, Pedro on his shoulders, Clara dancing in the grass. I stared between the two, the gun and the photo, and felt the weight of both futures pressing on me. I was an old man, yes, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. If they wanted war, they'd find me ready. And if my son wanted redemption, he'd damn well earn it. The next morning, the farm woke to a new kind of silence. Not the gentle peace of summer mornings past, but the tense quiet of a battlefield waiting for the first shot. I looked out across the fields, smoke from the burned barn still faint in the air, and made myself a promise. They could take my barn. They could smear my name. They could even drag my son through prison. But they would not take my family. Not while I still drew breath. The week they gave us passed like a storm cloud that never moved. Every sunrise felt borrowed. Every night stretched taut, waiting for headlights on the driveway. I barely slept. I'd sit on the porch with the revolver on my lap, watching the gravel road like it might come alive. Sam rotated shifts with me, shotgun balanced across his knees. Melissa kept the kids inside, windows covered. Life on the farm shrank to whispers and shadows. They didn't come the first night, or the second. By the third, the silence was almost worse than the threat. On the 4th day, I drove into town. I needed supplies, wire for the fences, nails for the caretaker's roof, but I also needed to show my face. Hiding only fueled rumors. At the hardware store, conversation stopped when I walked in. Some men nodded, some turned away. A few offered quiet words of support. Carl, the farmer who'd put his hand on my shoulder after Michael confessed, leaned in close. "Ed, word is those fellas aren't just loan sharks. They're tied to something bigger. Chicago, maybe. You don't want to be in their crosshairs." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm already there." When I returned, Sam was waiting by the barn ruins, arms crossed. "Got a visitor while you were gone. Sheriff Daniels." My gut tightened. What did he want? Sam spat into the dirt. "Warned us. Said the men tailing Michael are under investigation, but the law's slow. Too slow. Told me off the record to keep your powder dry." I looked out over the fields, the ashes of the barn still stinking in the wind. Powder dry. That was lawman code for be ready to shoot if you must. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with Melissa. She looked worn, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "They won't stop, Ed," she said softly. "Even if Michael serves his time, even if we pay some of it back. Men like that, they feed on fear." I nodded slowly. "Which means the only way to beat them is to stop being afraid." Her voice broke. "And how do we do that?" I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted to the stack of papers on the counter. The deed to the land, the notarized documents, the last proof that everything I'd built still belonged to me. By turning their game back on them, I finally said, "The plan came to me in pieces, like fence rails that only made sense once you laid them side by side. First, I moved money. Not much, just enough from the savings account Helen and I had kept hidden, the one even Michael never knew about. Not to pay the debt outright, but to dangle as bait. Second, I called Howard. "Draft me a contract," I told him. "A legal transfer, not of the land, but of the timber rights along the North Ridge. Make it clean, make it binding, but limited. 20-year lease, renewable only by me." Howard was quiet for a long moment. "You planning to sell those rights to them?" planning to trick them into believing they're winning. On the sixth night, the black SUV returned. Same 3 men, same slow boots on the porch. I opened the door before they could knock. "You've got what we asked?" the leader said. "Half," I replied, holding up a manila envelope. "Cash. The rest comes with this." I laid the contract on the table. The bulldozer snatched it up, frowning. "What's this?" "Northridge timber rights," I said. "You sign, you get access to lumber worth double what he owes. Legal, notarized, no tricks." The leader took the paper, scanned it with sharp eyes. His brow furrowed, then smoothed. He nodded once. "Smart old man." I met his gaze. "Smarter than you think." They left with the envelope and the contract, engines rumbling down the road. Melissa emerged from the kitchen, pale. "What did you just do?" "Bought us time," I said, "and gave them something that looks like gold, but isn't." Because here was the trick. The Northridge wasn't ready for logging. Half the trees were diseased, the ground too unstable. Any company trying to harvest would lose money faster than they made it. And when the men figured it out, they'd be angrier than before. But by then, Michael's case would be moving through court, the sheriff's investigation digging deeper into their dealings. All I had to do was hold the line. The reprieve lasted 3 days. On the 4th, I woke to pounding on the door. Not fists this time, but knuckles wrapped in authority. Sheriff Daniels. "They're on to you," he said without preamble. "Those men filed a civil complaint in Indy, claiming fraud on your timber contract. Judge threw it out, but they're mad, real mad. My advice, leave town for a while." I shook my head. "This is my land." Daniels sighed. "Stubborn as ever, just watch your back. They're circling." That night, the SUV didn't just stop at the end of the driveway. It came barreling up, lights off, gravel spraying. Doors slammed, boots pounded. Sam was already outside, shotgun raised. I followed, revolver in hand. The leader stepped forward, calm as ever, but his eyes burned colder. "You think you're clever, Whitmore?" he hissed. "Selling us rot wood? You just signed your family's death warrant." The bulldozer raised a crowbar. The wiry one flicked open a knife. And there we were, 3 men half my age, muscles coiled and mean, against an old man, a neighbor with a shotgun, and a farm that had already bled smoke and fire. I tightened my grip on the revolver. My voice came out steady. "This land has survived storms, droughts, and fools. You're just another season. And like all seasons, you'll pass." The bulldozer snarled, stepping closer. Sam cocked his shotgun. The leader raised a hand, stopping his men. His smile was gone now, replaced by something darker. "Last chance," he said softly. "By the end of this week, either he pays in full, or we take our payment in flesh." He leaned closer, so close I could see the flecks of gray in his beard. "And it won't be his flesh first. It'll be theirs." His finger flicked toward the caretaker's cottage, toward Melissa, toward the children. My blood turned ice. As they left, taillights vanishing into the dark, I knew the truth. The line had been crossed. This wasn't about money anymore. This was war. The days after their last threat crawled by slow as winter. Every sound felt like a warning, every shadow like a man crouching in the dark. I walked the farm with my revolver under my jacket and Sam at my side. Melissa barely slept, keeping the kids close as though her arms alone could shield them. By the 7th night, I knew. They weren't bluffing. The farm had never been so quiet. No wind in the trees, no frogs by the creek, just a stillness that pressed down, heavy and unnatural. I sat on the porch, lantern burning low, revolver resting across my lap. Sam leaned on the rail, shotgun ready. The dogs growled low in their throats. Then came the sound. Tires on gravel, slow, deliberate. Headlights cut through the dark like knives. They were back. The SUV rolled up, doors opening one by one. 4 men this time. The leader, the bulldozer, the wiry one with the knife, and a 4th I didn't recognize. Tall, scarred face, carrying a bat. They walked up the drive like they owned it, like my home was already theirs. The leader stopped at the porch steps, smile sharp as broken glass. "Time's up, Whitmore. No more games." Bring him out, or we burn this place to the ground with you in it." Sam raised his shotgun. "Step 1 foot closer, and you'll be limping home." The bulldozer barked a laugh. "You think 2 old men scare us?" I stood, revolver in hand, my voice steady. "Not 2 old men. 1 old man, 1 lawman, and a family that won't bow." That's when the door creaked behind me. Michael stepped out. He looked thinner, pale from his days in county lockup, but his eyes were steady, his hands not shaking. He carried nothing but the photograph Melissa had given me, folded tight in his grip. "I'm here," he said, voice strong. "I'm the one you want. Leave them out of this." The leader tilted his head, studying him. "Finally grew a spine, huh? Too late. Debt's more than money now. It's principle." Michael stepped off the porch onto the dirt. "Then take it out on me. But if you touch them..." His voice cracked, but he didn't falter. "You'll never stop running." The men laughed, circling him like wolves. Something in me snapped. I moved before thought. The revolver came up, my finger pulling hard. The shot cracked the night, echoing across the fields. The bullet tore into the dirt at the leader's feet, dust exploding. "Next one goes higher," I growled. Chaos erupted. The bulldozer charged, crowbar swinging. Sam fired, the blast of the shotgun deafening. The bulldozer spun, clutching his arm, blood blooming. The wiry one lunged, knife flashing, but Michael, God help me, grabbed him, wrestling like a man with nothing left to lose. They crashed into the dirt, knife skittering away. The scarred man swung his bat, slamming it into the porch rail, wood splintering inches from me. I fired again, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He screamed, stumbling back. The leader didn't flinch. He drew a pistol, raising it slow, deliberate, aimed straight at my chest. For a second, the world narrowed to that barrel, black and endless. Then Michael tackled him. They went down hard, the gun skidding across the dirt. The leader snarled, fists flying. Michael took the blows, blood splattering, but he didn't let go. I staggered down the steps, revolver raised. My hand shook, not from age, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. One shot would end it. One shot would brand me a killer. "Dad!" Michael gasped, pinned under the leader's weight. "Do it!" I froze. I saw him there, not the crooked lawyer, not the gambler, but my boy. The same boy who once begged me not to let go of the bike seat, who trusted me to keep him steady. "Please," he whispered. My finger tightened. Then sirens wailed. Red and blue lights cut across the fields. Sheriff Daniels' cruisers barreled up the driveway, doors flying open, deputies pouring out with guns drawn. "Drop your weapons," Daniels roared. The men froze, eyes wide, the bulldozer bleeding, the wiry one sprawled in the dirt, the scarred man clutching his shoulder, the leader locked under Michael's grip. One by one, they were cuffed, shoved into cars, their curses swallowed by flashing lights. Michael collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, blood dripping from his nose. I rushed to him, dropping to the dirt, pulling him into my arms. "It's over," I whispered. "It's over." He shook his head, voice ragged. "Not yet. I still have to pay." The deputies carted them off, the night swallowing the chaos in their wake. Sam leaned on his shotgun, breathing hard, eyes still sharp. Melissa came running, the kids crying in her arms. For a moment the farm felt whole again, scarred, burned, bloodied, but alive. I looked at Michael, battered but standing, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not forgiveness yet, not entirely, but the first fragile step toward it. The next morning, Sheriff Daniels stopped by. His hat was in his hands, his face tired. "You're lucky, Ed," he said. "We'd been building a case on those men for months. Your boy's confession gave us leverage. Tonight just sealed it." He paused, glancing at Michael. "But his charges still stand. Fraud, theft, forgery. He'll face sentencing." Michael nodded. His voice was steady. "I know." Daniel studied him, then me. Funny thing. Sometimes a man's lowest point is the only way he finds his way back up. I didn't answer. I just looked at my son, bruised and bloodied, and prayed Daniels was right. That night, as I walked the fields, the moon silver over the ruins of the barn, I realized something. The farm had been attacked, burned, nearly lost. But it stood, just as I did, just as Michael now tried to. The land doesn't forget storms, but it heals. Slowly, quietly. Maybe families do too. The morning of Michael's sentencing was cold enough to make the frost cling to the barn roof like lace. I stood at the edge of the porch, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the breath of the horses drift from the stables. The land felt quiet, almost respectful, as though it knew what kind of day it was. Michael came out of the spare room dressed in the same suit he'd worn to his mother's funeral. It hung looser on him now, his frame thinner, face older. He carried no briefcase, no papers, nothing that once marked him as an attorney, just himself, raw, humbled, waiting for judgment. "Dad," he said softly, as though he wasn't sure if he had the right to address me that way anymore. I nodded, finishing the last sip of coffee. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." The courthouse in Muncie smelled of old varnish and dust, the kind of place where time hung heavy in the air. The pews creaked under the weight of farmers, clerks, and townsfolk who'd all come to see the fallen lawyer face his reckoning. Melissa sat near the front, the children beside her. She clutched Clara's hand so tight her knuckles were white. Sam came too, leaning on his cane, his presence quiet but steady. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I rose too, though my knees ached with the effort. The proceedings blurred in my ears, charges read, evidence presented, Michael's own confession repeated by the prosecution. Fraud, forgery, attempted sale of property not his, words that clanged like iron chains. When asked if he had anything to say, Michael stood tall. "I don't deny what I did," he said. His voice carried through the room, stronger than I expected. "I betrayed clients. I betrayed my wife. I betrayed the man who gave me everything I ever had. I can't ask forgiveness. I can only ask for the chance to earn it someday." He glanced at me then, just a flicker, but enough to twist my chest tight. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp behind his glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, you've shown honesty here today, but the law still holds weight. You will serve 3 years in state prison. Due to cooperation and lack of prior violent record, parole may be considered after 18 months. The gavel struck, echoing through the chamber. Melissa wept quietly. The children clung to her. Sam put a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Michael bowed his head as though the sentence was less punishment than confirmation of what he already knew. As the bailiff led him away, he looked at me one last time. Not for rescue, not for appeal, just for acknowledgement. And for the first time in years, I nodded. A small nod, but enough. The farm felt emptier when I returned. His absence was like a missing post in a fence line, subtle at first, but the gap widened the longer you looked. Days stretched into weeks. Melissa moved into the old caretaker's house with the kids. She found work teaching at the elementary school. The children began to roam the fields, their laughter echoing across the corn rows like it once had for Michael and his cousins. Sam came by often, still spry despite the cane, reminding me with every story that the past had teeth, but also wisdom. But nights were hardest. Sitting on the porch, watching the stars, I'd find myself replaying it all. His lies, his fall, his brief flash of redemption when he shielded me from that gun. I asked myself 1,000 times where I'd gone wrong, and 1,000 times more whether there was still time to set it right. Letters began to arrive after 2 months, neat handwriting on lined prison paper. The first was short. "Dad, I'm alive. Don't waste worry on me." The second, longer. "They have a program here, agriculture training. I signed up. I figured if I ever walk that farm again, I better know how to work it honest this time." By the fourth, his words carried weight I hadn't seen in years. I miss the smell of tilled soil. I miss Clara's laugh. I miss things I used to think were beneath me. I think Mom would be ashamed of me, but maybe not forever if I can change. I read those letters in silence, sometimes under the kitchen lamp, sometimes in the fields. Every time something in me shifted, slowly, like thawing ground after winter. A year later, Michael came back. Parole had been granted for good behavior, and Sheriff Daniels himself brought him home in the back of the cruiser. not in cuffs, but in courtesy. He stepped out thinner still, but his eyes carried a clarity I hadn't seen since he was a boy. His hands were rougher, the calluses of real work etched across his palms. "Dad," he said again, same word as before. But this time his voice held weight, not shame. Melissa hugged him, tears streaming. The children clung to him, though awkwardly, as if relearning the shape of him. I didn't rush forward. I just stood on the porch, arms crossed. He walked to me slow, uncertain. "I know I don't deserve it," he said, "but I'd like a chance to work the land with you, to prove I can." For a long moment I said nothing. Then I stepped aside, nodding toward the fields. "Sun rises at 6, I said. "Don't be late." The first morning he showed up before dawn, work boots, gloves, shovel in hand. He didn't complain. He didn't posture. He just followed my lead, turning soil, mending fences, carrying feed. The land doesn't forgive laziness. Neither did I. But as days turned into weeks, I saw his back straighten, his steps grow sure, his eyes sharpen with a quiet pride. Melissa watched from the porch sometimes, the children at her side. Clara began to draw again, sketches of cornfields, of her father bent under the sun, of me sitting on the porch with my hat tipped low. Sam chuckled one day as he leaned on the rail. "Never thought I'd live to see him sweat honest," he said. Neither did I admitted. By harvest, Michael had proven more than I expected. He set up new irrigation lines, planted cover crops, even researched sustainable methods I hadn't bothered with. He talked less, listened more, and when he laughed, it was quiet, genuine, stripped of arrogance. One evening, after the last of the hay was stacked, we sat on the porch. The sky bled orange over the fields, cicadas humming in the trees. "Dad," he said, breaking the silence, "why didn't you let them take me that night? Why risk yourself for me after everything I'd done?" I stared at the horizon. The land stretched endless before us. "Because you're my son," I said simply. "And a father's job doesn't end when his child stumbles. It ends when he's gone, and I'm not gone yet." He swallowed hard, eyes shining. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Years passed. The debt slowly chipped away, each harvest paying down what once seemed insurmountable. Melissa built a new life teaching, steady and strong. Clara earned a scholarship for art. Sam passed on eventually, his cane leaning forever in the corner of my porch. Michael stayed, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The land became his classroom, his confessional, his redemption. One autumn evening, as we walked the rows together, he stopped, kneeling in the soil. "This dirt saved me," he said, running it through his fingers. "Not the court, not the prison, this." I looked down at him, my son, no longer fallen but rising. "No, son," I said. "You saved yourself. The dirt just reminded you who you were." Now, at 83, I rise each morning with the sun still on my face, the farm alive around me. My steps are slower, my back heavier, but my heart lighter. I watch Michael teach his own son to mend a fence, Clara sketching the fields she once feared she'd lose. The land will outlive me, but it will carry my story, my mistakes, my redemption, through them. If betrayal can wound deeper than any knife, then forgiveness, hard-earned, not given lightly, can heal stronger than steel. That's my legacy. Not the acres, not the barn, not the title deeds, but the truth that family, though fractured, can still be forged again. And when I go, I'll leave not just soil and timber behind, but roots deep enough to carry them forward. Because no matter how broken the branches, the tree still stands.